starts right now. So, like, bro, that prompter was fast as hell. And welcome back. We have what looks like 2 new hosts of Bets this semester. Diego Ortiz and Brianna St. Jean are joining me today. Brianna, just joking, but I'm glad to have you on the show as your first ever appearance on Bets. Thank you for coming on. I'm very excited. I'm very happy to be here, but it's also kind of bittersweet because I'm here to talk fantasy football, which I did very bad at this year. I did very bad at fantasy football this year, and I'm sure Tyler will dive right into that too. Yeah, and before we get into Tyler, obviously, Diego, just say so. How are you feeling today? How does it feel to make your Bets debut?
Feeling great, obviously. I'm excited for a really great semester. I think it'll be very fun.
And as we previewed in the open, Tyler has some of our honorables and dishonorables for this year's fantasy football. Tyler, break it down for us. What awards are we giving out today?
So I am going to be starting off with the dishonorables. These are guys who have ruined, likely, many of fantasy seasons, not just Breeze. So to start off with the worst Fantasy Player of the Year award, this goes to none other than Jacksonville Jaguars running back Travis Etienne Jr. He finished as the RB 35 this season, averaging an astounding 8.5 points. Last year, he finished as a top 10 running back, and this year-to-year fall-off is insane. Now, obviously, he had some injuries, but again, the lack of production is just it's night and day from what he was doing last season with the Jaguars. And now there's a lot that's happened with the Jaguars, obviously. Trevor Lawrence got hurt. They ended up firing Doug Peterson at the end of the season. It was just complete disaster from start to finish. But anyway, moving on to the Wish I Never Drafted You award. This is a guy who has been on this award many times throughout fantasy history. Christian McCaffrey. He ended up finishing at a nice position of the RB 69. He got the Madden curse. He started the year on injured reserve. Jordan Mason was getting a lot of the touches early in the year, and then he did come back. All fantasy believers, Matthew Bracker included, who drafted him number 1 with his first-round pick in our fantasy league, you'll see from these highlights, these are last year's highlights. He didn't play at all this year. He played 1 game where he was pretty good, and then he disappeared off the face of the earth once again. So again, it's just Christian McCaffrey. We thought maybe, the injury concerns are gone now. He's going to be A-okay forever here in the Niners. And he gets hurt once again because, of course, he does. Why wouldn't he? So now moving on to the Worst Rookie Fantasy Player Award. There were a lot of outstanding rookies this year, but Marvin Harrison Jr. disappointed the most. He finished at wide receiver 30. He was the most hyped up wide receiver prospect out of everyone. You had Malik Neighbors go off. You had Brian Thomas Jr. go off. You even had tight end Brock Bowers set a rookie record and finish at tight end 1. And to average just 11 points when you're touted as one of the greatest wide receiver prospects we've ever seen, and he is the number 1 option in that offense outside of James Conner, especially in the passing attack, it's just a very, very disappointing. And when you see all these other rookies, especially guys who got drafted after him, and even guys like Tyrone Tracy Jr., who in New York, it's just shocking that he had such a poor year this year. And now moving on to biggest underachiever, this goes to Breece Hall, a name Bree knows all too well. He was touted as a top 5 running back coming into this season, had an average draft position of around the 5 to 10 range. And he had some good stretches this season, but finishing as the RB 16 is not what you expect from a guy who comes into this year with the expectation of being the number 1 running back possibly. And this is a Jets offense that was just defunct, absolutely defunct, top to bottom. They fired their head coach, a theme you may have been noticing here in this. And Breece Hall, again, he got touches, so you see the flashes, and you'd understand it's like why he was so highly touted. But the consistency just wasn't there, and that's what makes this such a big disappointment. And moving on to the final award, we have biggest fall off, Deontay Johnson. Back when he was a Panther at the start of this year, he had a 4-week stretch where in 3 of those games, he was averaging over 20 points per game. He was a hot commodity in the trade market, both in fantasy and in real life, and when he got traded, he disappeared from the face of the earth. He did absolutely nothing for the Baltimore Ravens and is now on his 3rd team this season, the Houston Texans, who just won a playoff game. So at least he's got that going for him. But he finished the season as wide receiver 86, when earlier in the year, he was as high as wide receiver 13. I don't know what happened between Carolina and then he goes to a real offense in Baltimore with a MVP quarterback, and all of a sudden he just vanishes off the face of the earth. But those have been the dishonorable awards. I'll throw it back to you guys at the desk to give me your reactions and your takes on it.
Yeah, so obviously a great list. I have some gripes with a couple of the people, and I know Bree does as well. Do you want to get into the people that you maybe don't like to see on this list?
I kind of have the opposite. I believe that you have two absolute perfect awards for these people. I believe that Travis Etienne Jr. is in fact the worst fantasy player. I mean, even though I do have my issues with Breece Hall, but I also believe that the biggest underachiever is also Breece Hall. Because, okay, let's go back to look at Travis Etienne. Like you said, his production was horrible. And seeing him play was, honestly, it was baffling. Because you are getting paid so much money to be in this league, and you can only manage 2 rushing touchdowns over the season. You average 3.7 yards per carry. I'm sorry, but Tyler, I think you were 110% correct with this pick, and I also have to touch into Breece Hall. My fantasy team was in fact named Breece Hall because I'm Bree, and so I really banked on this being an awesome team with, you know, an awesome player, but he really let me down and definitely underachieved. Going on my fantasy app every single day, every now and then, and I would just see constant underachieved. He did not score what I was hoping for him to score. People were asking me to trade for him in the beginning of the season. And looking back, I really regret it because he just, with the injury concerns, with the inconsistent production, with the offensive struggles, Breece Hall, you made me upset. And that's all I have to say about that.
Oh, man. Well, I know when I was playing the Breece Hallers in fantasy football this year, I couldn't wait to get another win on my schedule. So unfortunately, Breece Hall wasn't the primary productive guy that you'd want to see, especially where he was drafted. Tyler mentioned earlier, he went from anywhere from the 5 to 10 range in that first round. You'd expect somebody like that to at least be in the top 10 of running backs this season. And he played the majority of his games, but he still only finished as the RB16 in PPR leagues. So definitely an underachievement from him. And Travis Etienne, what can you say about him? He was also drafted, second, third round this season?
Yep.
And he just wasn't able to produce like he normally is. Obviously, Tyler mentioned some of the reasons for that. Trevor Lawrence gets hurt, and then obviously the Jaguars just in general have been a terrible, terrible franchise and just terrible organization this year. But Travis Etienne Jr. is one of the reasons why that's possible. And
sure.
Diego, you have a couple agreements with this list, maybe a gripe?
Yeah, I think I agree with the worst player award going to Travis Etienne. I think maybe you could have thought about Michael Pittman too. I think he had a really huge fall off. When Anthony Richardson was playing for the Colts, he wasn't really throwing him the ball. But I think the only real gripe I had is sticking with the Niners for the Wish I Never Drafted You award. Brandon Ayuk, I mean, everybody, was hyped about him coming back, finally getting his whole contract situation figured out. And he just goes on the field. He doesn't really get productive, but, maybe there's some hope where, he's knocking some rust off. He didn't really, participate in training camp at all. And then he just, week by week, he didn't play with much effort. And then next thing you know, he tears his ACL, wasn't really ready for the season anyways. Now he has to miss the rest of the year. So I feel like a lot of people kind of drafted him in the middle or in late, just to see if maybe he'll come back, but he just really...
I feel like we could really put any Niner in that slot, not named George Kittle.
Yeah.
Because Debo was also terrible. Yeah. Jordan Mason started all right, but then became awful, which is why I traded him. So mostly just everyone on the Niners was bad. Brock Purdy especially too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. I just one of the underachievers of this year. I think I had him as my wide receiver 2 for an extended period of time, and then I was able to switch him over to a flex position, and then it just ended up becoming my
it's just
IR.
crazy because to me he just looked like an all-pro. He looked like just one of the elite receivers in the NFL last year alongside Deebo Samuel, and then
there was so much hype about him coming into the season. I mean, obviously he missed training camp, but you're expecting him to step into that wide receiver 1 role for the 49ers, and he couldn't do that when he was playing, and then obviously gets injured and is just no use to any fantasy owners at that point. And then I wanted to personally highlight Deontay Johnson. I had him as one of my biggest pickups earlier on in the season. He only had maybe 9 points combined through the first 2 games, and then went on a stretch where he averaged 22 points a game as a wide receiver. I thought that he'd be one of the wide receiver studs of the season, and then all of a sudden he just disappeared. He had 7 points for the rest of the season after week 6, which is unheard of in a lot of different ways, but then also the fact that he was just able to go to better teams. He went from Carolina to Baltimore, couldn't do anything, then went from Baltimore to Houston, also couldn't do anything. I'm just struggling to see where Deontay Johnson fits into any fantasy roster next season.
I think to me, like, for the problem with him is probably just like a lack of effort. I just feel like he's just not really like locked in.
100%. And as we did the fantasy dishonorables of this fantasy season, we're also going to be looking at some of our fantasy honorables, some of the good awards, something to cheer you guys up after this break.
I guess the crew's getting ready for the next segment on one of our amazing shows. I'm Nick Cohen, host of season 20 of Hitting the Field, and let me tell you about those amazing shows. On behalf of HTF, we hope you're enjoying today's content, but I'm here to tell you about everything else we offer here at the network. Mondays at 4, HTF Bets goes live for season 10 with 3 gamblers that, although it may not always seem like it, are here to help us all earn a little bit of extra money while we watch sports. Diego Ortiz, Tyler Brownrigg, and Andrew Gregg's ball knowledge and fun personalities make this show a fan favorite. On Tuesdays, you all loved it, so we brought it back for season 2. It's Girls Got Game, hosted by Frankie Noble, a show blending women in sports, the biggest sports news stories, and creative segments that make for a fun and engaging show. Next is everyone's favorite sports podcast, The Combine, hosted by who other than Ty Patton, an easygoing, conversational, and technical podcast dropping Wednesdays, also on Spotify at The Combine. Then tune in Thursdays at noon for the network's main show, season 20 of Hitting the Field, hosted by me. Here, we'll cover any sport, any topic, any story, no matter how obscure. We love some football, basketball, hockey, F1. We also cover baseball, soccer, and we even have to show the UFC love sometimes. Penultimately, TGIF, because Friday is nighttime, hosted by Kathleen Moore and Matthew Bracker. Season 8 of Nighttime is where you'll turn to for all things March Madness, UCF sports, and other collegiate events. We're ending with something brand new. HTFN has never had 6 shows running at once. Also filmed in our new podcast studio is HTFC, hosted by Edgar Rodriguez and Patrick De Leon. Football, or soccer in America, is the most popular sport in the world. Across multiple leagues and cups, soccer is a year-round sport, and HTFC is your new source to stay updated. Also on Spotify, by the way, at HTFC. Outside of our 6-show roster, be sure to tune in to our other content, such as the Studio Days vlog, run by our vlog squad of Brianna St. Jean, Michaela Croker, Ashley Rowe, and Ben Huber. Make sure to follow us on our social medias like Instagram, Facebook, and X to stay updated on all HTFN news. Remember to subscribe right here on YouTube, leave a like and comment, and with that, I think we're ready for your next segment. I'm Nick Cohen. Thank you for your continued support, and back to your regularly scheduled programming.
And we are back, and we are going to get into the NFL honorables in just a second. But look who is back at the desk. Nick Cohen couldn't stay gone for long. He had to come back here.
Listen, I promise I know my place. I know when to move on, but, they needed some football fanatics, so, I'm here to answer the call.
And me and Diego still here as always, but now I'm going to toss it over to Andrew at the green screen so he can get right into his honorables for this fantasy season.
Yeah, so Tyler, obviously, I know some people might be a little sad after your segment. We maybe dissed a couple of different players, but I want to get into my honorable segment. So for the best overall fantasy player of this year, I have Jamar Chase, the Triple Crown winner. He obviously had the most yards, he had the most touchdowns, and he also had the most receptions as a wide receiver this season. Just one of the best players in the NFL, obviously. And this award really came down to Saquon Barkley and Jamar Chase. And the fact that fantasy does run into week 18 sometimes for, I don't know if your league is set up this way, but if it is, obviously, fantasy sometimes goes into week 18, which is unfortunate for some people as Saquon Barkley had to sit out and Jamar Chase was still able to play. Given that fact, I think that Jamar Chase has to be your best overall fantasy player of the year. And he put up, 46? He put up over 40 points in that last game. So for people that had him in the championship, he obviously came through for them. And then for my most valuable waiver wire pickup, I have Jonnu Smith. He was open on the waiver at a 60% rate until week 11 of the NFL fantasy season. And after week 11, he averaged over 20 fantasy points a game and was just one of the best fantasy players in general. Obviously, tight end is one of the positions where you never really know what's going to happen from year to year. Travis Kelce and Andrews obviously had significantly worse seasons than they were projected for, and then Jonnu Smith stepped up as the tight end 4 for this season, and he wasn't really having as good of a start to the season, but after week 11, he turned it on. He had 5 separate over 20-point fantasy performances and just was one of the better waiver wire pickups in possibly fantasy history. Moving on, I have my best late round pick, and it is Jaden Daniels out of the Washington Commanders. Obviously, we saw him last night. He just won his team a playoff game and stepped into that QB1 role automatically with this team and has not looked back at all. He's been one of the best quarterbacks in all of the NFL this season, and for fantasy especially, he finished the season as the QB4 on the league, which means that he was only 3 other people in the whole NFL were better than him as a fantasy quarterback. Obviously, he did that with his legs, his running ability, but then also he was a great passer, completing 69% of his passes and also having over 3,500 yards this season. So I don't think you can put it past him. Jaden Daniels, for a 10th round pick, was one of the best 10th round picks possibly ever in fantasy history as well. So for my best defense, I have the Broncos. Obviously, a lot of big names on that team, Patrick Surtain. And what people aren't talking about is that they were one of the highest scoring defenses in this league as well. Obviously, both they had 5 touchdowns on the year, which is one of the best clips in the NFL this season. And then also they got a bunch of sacks every year. They had a bunch of games where they had multiple either interceptions or fumbles, and were just the #1 defense all season from start to finish. Being able in fantasy, when you have a defense that you don't have to worry about streaming every week and just can consistently plug in and play them, I think that's obviously a big win, and the Denver Broncos are your best defense for the season. And then finally, we have the league winner award, which goes to Jahmyr Gibbs, who averaged the most points over the fantasy playoffs, which was from week 14 to week 18 in some cases. He averaged almost 30 points a game, and after David Montgomery went down, he just turned into a different person, different animal, some are saying. He had a bunch of touchdowns. He obviously had a bunch of yards and was just one of the better players in fantasy football towards the end. Obviously, the RB1, the flex one, whatever you want to call it. Jahmyr Gibbs was one of the best players in the NFL, and averaging almost 30 fantasy points during the playoffs. He was obviously a league winner this season. So, guys, what do you think about these picks?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. A lot of great players and names on this list. Nick, I want to start with you as a resident Dolphins fan. Jonnu Smith, he was a nightmare for me. I had to play him. I felt like every time I played Andrew and I saw him starting Jonnu Smith in our fantasy league, I was absolutely terrified. So what was the success that Jonnu Smith, what caused him that success?
To be honest, I think it's just that Miami finally saw that they had some talent at the tight end position. Now, that's not to say that Mike Gesicki, who was with us for many years, didn't have talent. He did, and I have his jersey at home because of it. We just disrespected him. But Jonnu Smith, he is so quick. He's like a tall receiver. He, in his first season with the Dolphins as a free agent signing, he set the Dolphins record for most catches, most touchdowns, most yards by a tight end in Dolphins history, which is simply insane with 884 yards and then 8 touchdowns. I think it's really just because Miami decided to actually use a tight end this season, which is something we don't normally do.
Yeah, and again, another notable waiver wire pickup I'd like to add, Chase Brown for the Cincinnati Bengals. He had an outstanding year, really flew under the radar for everyone, and Ty Patton, who I played in the fantasy championship, actually started him, and he thankfully got injured right before scoring what might have been the touchdown that would have pushed him over the edge. But Diego, now I want to move with you. I want you to tell me about Jaden Daniels, this outstanding rookie season he has had. What has brought this about?
I think for me, with Jaden Daniels, I think it's just the fact that he just plays so fearless. I mean, you think about it, every week it feels like the Commanders are in such a close game late in the fourth quarter. It comes down to one of the last 2 plays, and Jaden Daniels is always just stepping up, trying to make a play, whether it's keeping it on 4th down, making the right throw to for a touchdown. Obviously, the Hail Mary against the Bears was, just unreal. I feel like he was just ready to come into the NFL, be a franchise QB, be a starter, ever since he just got drafted. And I feel like that's just really propelled him to be one of the really premier quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
Yeah, and then being just such a dynamic dual threat as well is something you love to see as a fantasy owner. But now I want to touch in on his player of the year selection, which I love, Jamar Chase. Now, if you haven't picked it up already, I won the HTF Showrunners Fantasy League, and Andrew Montana, he's off screen right now being a little salty because I didn't draft Jamar Chase. I traded for Jamar Chase. I traded Saquon Barkley and a bunch of other players for Jamar Chase and Terry McLaurin and a few others. But the big get for me was Jamar Chase. And boy, oh boy, was Jamar Chase outstanding for me. He goes on an absolute tear this season, scoring a season-high 55.4 4 against Baltimore on Thursday Night Football, absolutely torching them. And then he threw in another 45, 18, 22, 19, 25, averaging well over 22 in the fantasy playoffs. I had some scares during the fantasy playoffs, all right? I was down at times. You can ask Andrew, you can ask Ty Patton. But I had Jamar Chase on my team. I had him. I knew I could rely on. Now, Diego, you have some disagreement, I think?
Yeah, I would probably say the best overall fantasy player was Saquon Barkley. I mean, he rushed for over 2,000 yards. Obviously, MVP candidate. Probably going to win Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, he was really remarkable. I mean, it felt like every game he was just going, for almost 200 yards. It felt like, to me, Saquon Barkley was by far the best player. And then also Lamar Jackson, too.
Yes.
Lamar Jackson had 30 points a week almost. He was just unbelievable. He's probably going to win MVP. So, yeah.
He should.
Yeah.
Maybe. Andrew, I see you making some faces over there. Do you have any thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, I will say the committee had a hard time picking the best overall fantasy player of the year award. Jamar Chase, Saquon Barkley, what can you say? Both great players. Jamar Chase with the Triple Crown, Saquon Barkley attacking records that previously were thought to be unbreakable, to be honest. But I hear what you're saying, Diego, and I almost just want to say that for fantasy owners, think about the fantasy owner who had Saquon Barkley in Week 18. He's been performing all season long. He just needs him for one last game in the championship. Unfortunately, he had to sit out for that reason. Jamar Chase was just the better fantasy player, but overall, I think it's hard to say that anybody had a better season than Saquon Barkley.
Yeah. And now, Nick, we talked about Jaden Daniels, but who are some other late-round picks who really emerged this season?
Yeah, so there's a couple names, and they're all rookies. It's Brian Thomas Jr., absolutely insane season for a rookie
Finishes
receiver.
wide receiver 4.
Mm-hmm. And his quarterbacks were Trevor Lawrence, who is not good, but then got injured, okay. But then Mac Jones, who's even worse than Trevor Lawrence, and he still put up the 4th most receiving yards in the league as a rookie. So he was a great steal because he was taken past round 8. And then also Brock Bowers, who I tried to get many times from Andrew Montana in our league. I did get in my other league, and he got me all the way to the fantasy championship. Brock Bowers as a rookie tight end, he broke so many records. He was simply amazing, nothing shy of that. And then also, we already briefly touched on him, but Chase Brown was also another great late-round pick because he was not drafted early. Bad call on me, but I thought that Zach Moss was going to be the starter in Cincinnati. Yeah. So,
I mean, he just got hurt.
He did.
Yeah, he just got hurt, and Zach Moss had seen success on the Colts, a lot of great production. Now, before we go to break, I just want to touch on Jahmyr Gibbs, my biggest op in football. I hate you, Jahmyr Gibbs. You scored 4 touchdowns against my Vikings in the season finale to steal the 1 seed, and you steal RB1 from Saquon. I just cannot stress how aggravating this guy is, and I hate how everyone's like, oh, we love the Lions, they're so great, Dan Campbell, whatever. Shut up, Ty Patton. I hate them. I wish them nothing but failure in life. But with that being said,
you're just mad that your team's going to lose tonight.
I'm allowed to be mad. Too. I'm allowed to be mad.
The Rams,
I'm allowed to show outrage and crash out on the show.
Puka and Cooper Kupp are going to put up 150
We're going to go to break
each
now.
Tonight.
If you want to see Nick Cohen, tune in to main show. But we'll be right back after this.
Is a whole team of engineers and technologists. And you can be a part of such a team through SIMTI at UCF. You'll join a team of students just like you who are ready to innovate the future of TV and film.
With SIMTI at UCF, you'll be able to connect with local industry pros, learn about new technology in the industry, as well as get backstage experience that really matters. Join SIMTI for a backstage pass to all of this.
We meet every last Monday of the month for our general body meetings. There, we discuss how new technology is being used to create new media, and we get to highlight local professionals and their specialties.
On top of that, we have some site visits planned, so tune into our social media to be notified of when those will happen.
So if you're ready to pull back the curtain and find out what really happens behind the scenes, join SIMTI at UCF.
Welcome back, and as we teased at the beginning of the show, we're putting a bit of a spin on our typical Surefire Picks of the Week segment. And this week, we'll be doing Bad Beats and Best Bets, where we go over recent games where a bet flipped at the last second, as well as covering our singular best bet tonight.
I'm very excited for this. I cannot wait. But Andrew, get us started.
We start with the Bears and Packers, where the over-under is 43.5, and Josh Jacobs would help contribute to the early scoring, breaking tackles and rushing in for a 9-yard touchdown, his 15th of the season, doing his final Lambeau leap. We fast forward to the fourth quarter, where an over 22-minute scoring drought would end on this play action pass DJ Moore takes it from 32 yards out as the Bears are fighting for their pride and as hard as they possibly can for a worst possible draft pick. With only 4 minutes left on the clock, Green Bay has solely backups in, which is more than enough to get the job done. Emmanuel Wilson cuts to the outside and goes in for a 21-yard touchdown and hits a nice little celly here. The total is now sits at 40, and Brandon McManus just gets his 55-yarder to go through the uprights, putting Green Bay back up by 1 with a minute left to go. Any score here would put this game over 43.5 points, and miraculously, the Bears would put together their most competent late-game drive this season, as Caleb Williams would hit DJ Moore to set up a potential game-winning field goal. Bears fans and overbettors alike would be biting their nails watching as a Cairo Santos 51-yard field goal is good, sending the Bears to Cancun in fashion and ruining the day of anyone who bet the under.
Also breaking their losing streak against the Packers. But now we go to Tennessee, where backup running back Dameon Pierce breaks free loose early in the second quarter for 92 yards. He is going to go all the way and make it a 14-0 game right here early on. The number we are trying to avoid under bettors is 37.
Hold on, you said 13-0 or 14-0?
Oh, I'm sorry. He missed the extra point. I thought kickers are supposed to make those. But now we go on to late in the third. Davis Mills scrambling, trying to stay relevant, fumbles the ball, but don't worry, God has favorites, and the Texans recover. And now they're going for it here on 4th down. Mills scrambling, finds his man in the back of the end zone, but oh, he just can't reach, and they turn it over. No points anyway. But Will Levis, ever the gift giver, turns it over to Derek Barnett, the former Eagle, and the big man rumbles, and he tumbles, and he goes into the end zone for 6. Oh boy, but don't worry, we get a bit of a stalemate now. Under bettors, we're looking good. But Will Levis, what's this? He's looking deep, throwing up a prayer to who will answer it?
No way.
Martin. Who is this man? No one will ever know, but don't worry. So long as this pass isn't caught by this wide open tight end Josh Weil, and oh, would you look at that? How unfortunate. Underbettors around the world's kids are now no longer going to college.
Here we go, Texas versus Ohio State. The line at Texas plus 6.5. Ohio State starts the game hot in the first quarter, scoring as Quishon Judkins runs it in. Texas trying to answer back late in the first half. Ewers finds Silas Bolden, who gets open, breaks a tackle, and creates a big play to send Texas into the red zone. Nice play there. And then Ewers would drop back and deliver a perfect pass to Jaden Blue out of the backfield, tying the game up at 7 apiece.
Flex on him, Jaden, flex on him. Quinn Ewers is talking to him nice.
Then, with about 3 minutes to go in the third, Texas down a score. Ewers finds Blue again as he gets free with one man to beat for his second touchdown of the game.
The Sooner fan in me hates watching this.
Then in the fourth quarter, with about 6 minutes to go, Texas still looking to stay alive as Ewers finds Gunnar Helm down the field, stiff arms Caleb Downs, and then he lets him know about it after.
It's 15, ref. What are we doing?
And then Ewers finds Matthew Golden, his main target, down the field for a deep completion to bring them into scoring position.
Oh, it's not looking good here, but oh, will they score?
Texas then elects to run the ball. They lose yardage, and they get stuffed all the way back to the 8-yard line.
All we need is a field goal, though, for this to hit. All we need. No need to panic yet.
Then on 4th down, with the game on the line, Ewers drops back, but his former roommate at Ohio State, Jack Sawyer, comes to his blind side, knocks the ball loose, and returns it for over 80 yards to the end zone to give Ohio State a 14-point lead late in the game, giving us a bad beat with the Texas plus 6.5 bet. Ohio State would go on to win the game 28-14.
So you look at some of these bad beats, right?
Absolutely tragic stuff.
Tragic stuff, and I also think that maybe on a celebratory note, Ryan Day, I think that's the fastest I've ever seen a coach run down that sideline. He was sprinting down, trying to run with the big man. And then
horns down, though. Am I right?
Horns down. So we have a new part of the segment as well. We're looking at our singular best bet of the week. Tyler, get us started.
Yeah, so I'm going to go into Monday Night Football all here in the playoffs. The Vikings taking on the LA Rams, and I'm going with Justin Jefferson and Aaron Jones to combine for 2+ touchdowns. That is sitting at plus 165. These guys are the cornerstone of the Vikings offense, and I think obviously they're going to be Kevin O'Connell is going to be looking to get them the ball in the red zone. Excuse me.
100%. And Diego, what do you have for tonight's picks?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the Pistons at Knicks game tonight. I like Detroit plus 7, sitting at minus 112. Detroit winners of the last 9 out of their last 11 games. Feels like this team is playing with a whole new energy. And the Knicks obviously are playing well. I think the Knicks will win, but I think Detroit will keep it close.
100%. And as we wrap up, obviously we have a Monday Night Football game, as Tyler covered. I just think that the Minnesota Vikings, Tyler's team here, they're just a better team. Obviously, in our mock show, we said that the Rams are possibly Super Bowl contenders, but I just don't see it. I think that the Vikings cover this 2.5 spread as well, but I think that just outright, the Vikings will just win this game.
I will
Tyler.
fine you if the Vikings lose.
I don't think
I
it'll
will
be my.
blame you.
It'll be my fault.
It's going to 100% be your fault, and I will hate you for it.
Well, we'll see if I'm right and you're right next episode on Bets next week.